Hello everyone, our topic this week was requested by Wesley VL. We'll be going over the Amazons from Warhammer Fantasy.
First things first. For those unfamiliar, Warhammer 40k and Warhammer Fantasy, often previously simply called Warhammer, are two different games made by the same company. Warhammer came first, and as you might have guessed, played in a fantasy setting, with Warhammer 40k coming later and having a sci-fi setting. For any who are recently looking into Warhammer Fantasy stuff, you might be confused by your searches coming up with something called Age of Sigmar instead. TLDR, the Warhammer Fantasy had an in-universe Ragnarok event that reset the world. The new world is being run under the name Warhammer Age of Sigmar, rather than Warhammer Fantasy, which the devs are using to do a whole mess of redesign things that we're not going to get into here. But the 40k Fantasy Age of Sigmar distinctions were something we had to figure out personally before getting into the actual meat of research for this and other videos, so we thought it was worth mentioning.
The Amazons are an odd faction within the Warhammer Fantasy setting in that they made an initial appearance in the first edition of the Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game way back in 1986, but have received virtually no lore or statistical adjustments, overhauls, or updates with successive editions of the game, though rules for use in and figures for the Warhammer wargame were added at some point, and they have appeared in a handful of spin-off properties. On top of that, their story is vaguely convoluted, partially because there wasn't much made after their initial creation, and partially because most of what was added later is presented in an in-universe, this is what the stories say style, some of which contradict itself, presumably on purpose. Whatever their origins, Warhammer's Amazons take the less often seen tribal jungle warrior approach, rather than the Greco-Roman warrior design that most of us are probably familiar with. Though it's worth noting that there are accounts of so-called Amazons from just about every region of the world, and so this is not an unheard of design. In fact, the Amazon River of South America earned the name Amazon River after a Spanish explorer was attacked by a fierce group of warrior women while he was mapping said river, and he was reminded of the Amazons of Greco-Roman myth, and thus dubbed the waters the Amazon River. Which is awesome.
In regards to their origin, if what others claim about Amazonian mythology is to be believed, they are a race of sort of demi-deific half-elves, with Calith, the mother of all Amazons, being the offspring of the Amazonian god of war and an elven god of the sea, while all other Amazons were born of Calith thereafter. In this version of their origin story, the Amazons were originally considered the handmaidens of the gods during the creation of the world, granted great wisdom and power, along with seeming immortality. Then, when chaos entered the world, and the old gods fled or were destroyed, the Amazons stood their ground in a losing battle of attrition, until they were eventually pushed back into the jungles, where they can now be found. Dangerous relics of a forgotten time. The other origin story we could find for the Amazons seems more likely, since it doesn't in any way conflict with the actual creation story of Warhammer Fantasy's world. In the fantasy setting, the first faction to come into existence were the Lizardmen, and they were created by the Old Ones, a literal race of aliens who seeded life, including elves, dwarves, and humans, in an attempt to create a force capable of resisting the forces of chaos, which the Old Ones and the Lizardmen also worked to keep from entering the world for as long as possible. Eventually, though, their seals failed, chaos was let into the world, and the Old Ones vanished. Whether they left, died, or were hiding out somewhere is unknown. And it was the work of all of the remaining races, particularly the magical might of the Lizardmen and the Elves, that pushed chaos back.
That's the quote-unquote real creation story for the Warhammer Fantasy world, and the second origin story for the Amazon seems to fit much better with it. The aforementioned Lizardmen, as the Old One's first creations, had access to things like advanced technology, though over the years since Chaos invaded the world, they've largely forgotten how to maintain it and in some cases how to use it. In this second version of the story, the Amazons were a group of warrior women that the Lizardmen sort of adopted. Don't make it weird. No matter the origins, both Amazons and Lizardmen reproduce asexually, so just stop. Stop. Just stop. These warriors rose up against their fellow humans when they invaded the Lizardmen's territory, and in response the Lizardmen brought the Amazons into the fold, gifting them with immortality, which the Lizardmen themselves had already, and shared the knowledge of so-called High Age relics, technology. In the oldest version of the Amazon story, these two cultures came together far enough in the past that they both knew how to work the old sci-fi tech, but while the lizards forgot how to maintain everything, the Amazons largely retained this knowledge, though no matter the version, neither is capable of recreating said technology.
As previously mentioned, the Amazons are pretty much ignored in the lore of the primary Warhammer fantasy setting thereafter. In regards to questions concerning the Amazons in Age of Sigmar, the author, who has been handling a major chunk of the Sigmar lore, has stated that they died along with most everyone else during the End Times Ragnarok event. And since there's been no mention of them since, it'd be safe to assume that we won't be seeing anything more about the Amazons from the Warhammer devs in the near future. The Amazons have appeared in all kinds of side games related to Warhammer Fantasy and even 40k, though. There are several skirmish-style games, which is basically the war game on a smaller scale, thus cheaper, and usually with some sort of thematic story element that includes Amazons or something like them, though. Many of these tabletop games also have a video game adaptation. Notably, Mordheim is a Warhammer Fantasy setting skirmish game that takes place in a city ravaged by a meteor fall, which is bad on its own, but made worse by the fact that said meteor was essentially made of pure chaos magic. Yes, that's a thing, and yes, it is as bad or worse than it sounds. Amazons act as one of the recruitable unit types in this game. They also appear in the wildly non-canon Blood Bowl games, which are games where all the factions of the Warhammer Fantasy world play a meaner, deadlier, rugby is too gentle for us, vaguely football-like game. During the off-season, life proceeds as normal in the fantasyverse. Wars, bloodshed, rawr! But during Blood Bowl season, war stops across the world and everyone plays Blood Bowl instead. Because sports. The Amazons are one of the possible teams in the game as well. Similarly, another skirmish game called Necromunda, which is essentially a city-based sci-fi gang war in the 40k universe, has several houses that act as the faction gangs. In the newest iteration, one of the houses has been revamped to basically be space Amazons, complete with techno-magical asexual reproduction and the punk rocker look of some of the original Warhammer Fantasy Amazonian designs.
And that's basically the Amazons, immortal punk rock jungle warriors of the Warhammer games. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave us a like and maybe share it with someone you know might like it. If you have ideas for videos you'd like to see us do in the future, do like Wesley VL and let us know in the comments down below. If you'd like to see more videos from us in the future, be they lore, let's play, or other, go ahead and hit that subscribe button.
In the meantime, this has been True Masters and Morons, signing off. Thanks for watching this video. If you'd like to see more like it, hit that subscribe orb.
To see our last Let's Play, click or tap the link on the right.
For our last lore video, click the link on the left.
Thank you to all of our patrons for making these videos possible.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.